It was only a dare, fueled by 3 tequila shots and a wounded pride. She was supposed to press one kiss to the mouth of the stranger in the shadowed corner booth and walk away, laughing, story earned, dignity intact. But when his hand closed around her waist, like a brand through sapphire silk, Nora Bellamy understood too late that she hadn't kissed a stranger. She had kissed the most dangerous man in Boston, and he had absolutely no intention of letting her go. The gilt room kept its lights low for a reason. Tucked behind an unmarked door on a cobblestone stretch of the North End, the speakeasy was built to swallow secrets whole, its brick walls sweating gold under antique sconces, its bar lined with bottles no menu ever listed a price for. Ice cracked in crystal. A trio in the corner played something slow and brassy. Nora sat in a curved leather booth with a glass of sparkling water and a twist of lime, feeling, as she often did in rooms like this one, like a woman who had wandered onto the wrong stage. She was a size 20 in a room stitched together from size 2s, and she had learned a long time ago exactly how that felt. The quick once-over, the flicker of surprise when she opened her mouth and something intelligent came out. She had ordered the dress for tonight anyway. A deep midnight wrap, tailored close through the waist and generous through the hip, cut to make no apology whatsoever for the body underneath it. Her dark hair fell in loose waves past her shoulders. Her lipstick was a deep wine red she'd practiced twice in the mirror before deciding she liked it. She knew, objectively, that she looked good. It was the 26 years of noise underneath the knowing that she hadn't quite learned to switch off. She had earned every inch of the confidence she was trying to hold on to tonight. 6 years of 80-hour weeks had gotten her through the grind of a Big 4 training program, 3 professional certifications stacked up like armor, and a reputation inside Sterling Hale as the auditor you handed the file nobody else wanted to touch, the one who found the rot before it spread. None of that had ever stopped a stranger's eyes from doing the quick, involuntary sweep the moment she walked into a room, sizing her up and, more often than not, sizing her down. She had stopped waiting for the world to catch up to her a long time ago. It was easier to be excellent than to be liked by people who'd already decided who she was before she opened her mouth. Across the table, Brooke was 3 glasses into a bottle of something sparkling and expensive. The kind of friend who'd known Nora since freshman orientation and had never quite stopped treating her like a project. "Come on, Nora, live a little," Brooke said, setting her glass down harder than the moment called for. "It's your birthday. You've spent the whole night doing math in your head like we're at a networking mixer for Sterling Hale." "I am living," Nora said, and meant it mostly. "I just don't think getting sick in the back of an Uber counts as glamorous." Brooke rolled her eyes, leaning in, her gaze sweeping the room like she was hunting for ammunition. "You never take a real risk. You hide behind that job like it's a shield. And if we're being honest, you use your body as one too. You think men don't look because you're bigger. They do. You just never give them the chance." The words landed exactly where Brooke meant them to. Nora's grip tightened on her glass. It wasn't that she didn't want to be looked at. It was that she was tired, bone tired, of the particular way men looked at her when they realized a plus-size woman could also be sharp enough to catch every discrepancy in a set of books before lunch. Tired of the surprise dressed up as a compliment. She hadn't been hiding. She'd been refusing to accept anything less than the real thing. "I don't hide," Nora said, quiet and level in a way that should have warned Brooke off. "I have standards." It didn't. Brooke's eyes lit with the particular gleam of a woman who'd found her opening. "Prove it." She pointed a manicured finger toward the raised alcove at the far end of the room. "Truth or dare? I dare you to go kiss him." Nora followed the finger before she could stop herself, and her breath caught somewhere behind her sternum. The man in the elevated corner booth wasn't merely a patron. He looked like he owned the building, and possibly several blocks around it. Somewhere in his mid-30s, dark hair combed back with precision, a jaw sharpened by a day's worth of stubble, and a charcoal suit that fit him the way only real tailoring does, stretched taut over shoulders, built for something other than boardrooms. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't speaking to the two enormous men flanking his table like statuary. He was simply watching the room, still and unblinking, the way a predator watches a field before it decides the grass isn't worth the trouble. Nora had lived in the city her whole life, had learned to read a room full of old money the way she read a balance sheet, and every instinct she owned was telling her that whatever this man did for a living, it wasn't listed on any org chart she'd ever audited. Even from across the room, something about him snagged her attention and refused to let go. An unplaceable gravity that made the rest of the gilt room look like scenery built around him. "Absolutely not," Nora whispered, her pulse already climbing. "Look at him, Brooke. He looks like he collects debts for a living. His security will have me on the floor before I get within 5 feet. "Coward," Brooke sang, loud enough to draw a glance from the next table. "Safe. Funny, fat Nora. Always playing it safe." That did it. Something in Nora went hot and clean and furious, the old label landing like a struck match. Safe. Funny. Fat. She set her glass down with a sharp clink of ice against crystal, stood, and smoothed the dark fabric over her hips. "Hold my purse," she said. And before the part of her brain built for spreadsheets and risk assessments could throw up a single objection, she was already crossing the Persian rug toward the alcove, her heels finding a rhythm against the floor that felt braver than she actually was. The two men at the edge of the booth shifted the moment she got close, hands drifting toward the inside of their jackets. "This is a private table," one of them started, voice like gravel dragged over pavement. The man in the center raised a single hand, heavy silver ring catching the low light, and the guard went still and silent as a switch thrown. Up close, he was worse. Better. Whichever word fit the fact that Nora's whole body had gone electric. His cologne wrapped around her, cedar and tobacco, and something underneath that smelled expensive in a way she couldn't name. He didn't say anything. He simply looked up, his gaze moving slow and unhurried from her face, down the length of her. No flicker of the polite surprise she'd braced for, only a heat that made the room feel 10 degrees warmer. "I'm sorry," she blurted, voice betraying her with a small tremor. "I lost a bet." She meant to brush her lips against his cheek and be done with it, a coward's version of brave. But as she leaned down, his hand came up fast, closing around the curve of her waist. Not rough, just immovable, an iron band that had decided something before she had. He pulled her forward and down, off balance, until she landed against his chest, and the gasp she meant to make was swallowed whole. He didn't take the peck she'd offered. He took the kiss she hadn't. His mouth was firm, tasted like good scotch and better trouble. And when his other hand slid up into her hair at the nape of her neck, Nora's brain went entirely, gloriously blank. She had never been kissed like this, like she was something to be claimed rather than tolerated. And for one long, humiliating second, she kissed him back, her hands finding the solid muscle under his jacket before she remembered where she was. When he finally released her, the whole room seemed to be holding its breath. Nora sat back, chest heaving, lipstick smeared, and looked at him, braced for a smirk, a dismissal, a joke at her expense. Instead, he lifted a thumb and dragged it slow across her bottom lip. "You taste like lime," he said, his voice a low, rough thing that seemed to move through her rather than around her. "What's your name?" "Nora. Tesoro," he murmured, and it took her a beat too long to realize it wasn't her name. It was an endearment, something soft wrapped around a blade. Panic arrived late but total. Nora scrambled backward off his lap, her legs shaking so badly she nearly went down in her heels. "I have to go," she managed, and fled before he could answer, ignoring Brooke's delighted shriek behind her, bursting out into the cold slap of a Boston night, hailing the first cab she saw with both arms. She fell into the back seat with her heart still hammering, and the ghost of his hand still burning on her waist. And some deep animal part of her understood even then that the dare wasn't over. It had only just started. Luca Marchetti did not chase women. Women, as a rule, came to him already knowing what he was, already calculating what they could get out of proximity to a man with his kind of money and his kind of danger. And he had grown so used to that particular arithmetic that he barely registered it anymore. He had watched Nora Bellamy cross the gilt room with her spine straight and her hands shaking, expecting nothing from him, wanting nothing from him except to survive a dare and get back to her friend. And something in his chest had reorganized itself entirely in the time it took her to reach his table. She hadn't looked at his suit, his watch, the men flanking him like sentries. She looked at his face like a woman deciding whether to be afraid of him. And then she had stopped being afraid anyway. He hadn't planned to touch her. He certainly hadn't planned to keep her. He watched her flee through the front doors with her friend shouting after her, watched the maitre d' straighten instinctively as she passed, and did not move from his booth for a long time. One of his men leaned in to ask if he wanted her followed, found, brought back. Luca said no. He didn't need to have her found. He already knew, with the same cold certainty he brought to every acquisition he'd ever made, that their paths were about to cross again. And soon, whether the city cooperated or not. He simply had not expected fate to hand her to him, wrapped in an Audit engagement letter less than 12 hours later. The morning light through the windows of Nora's South End apartment was cruel and unfiltered. She sat at her kitchen island nursing black coffee and 2 Advil, typing with the particular aggression of a woman trying to outrun a headache and a memory at the same time. She had spent half the night convincing herself the man from the bar had been a fever dream, and the other half failing. By the time the sun came up, She had made herself a promise. Focus on the real thing. She was a senior financial auditor at Sterling Hale. She had a mortgage, a partner-track timeline that didn't leave room for reckless nights and unmarked speakeasies. And today, of all days, was too important to waste on regret. Sterling Hale was bringing on a massive new client, a sprawling logistics conglomerate, and her managing partner had handed her the initial risk assessment personally. By 9 that morning, she was crossing the marble lobby of the Hancock Tower in a tailored charcoal suit, hair pulled back, every trace of the girl from the gilt room locked somewhere she didn't plan on revisiting. She felt like herself again, not the flustered woman who'd lost a dare, but the auditor who found the number nobody else caught. She stepped into the 54th floor boardroom to find Gerald Vance already pacing, sweat beading at his hairline despite the air conditioning. "Nora, thank God," he said. "The CEO's coming down personally. They move billions through their shipping lanes. We cannot lose this account." "Breathe, Gerald," she said, setting her portfolio on the table with a calm she mostly felt. "It's numbers. I've read the preliminary filings. It's a holding company with heavy infrastructure assets. We'll map the cash flow, flag the variances, and be done in 3 weeks." The doors opened, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. 4 men walked in, 3 of them broad-shouldered and sharp-eyed, in a way that read less like corporate escort and more like a tactical unit clearing a room. The 4th man, the one walking dead center, stole the air out of Nora's lungs before she'd even registered his face. It was him. He wore navy today instead of charcoal, a heavy gold watch at his wrist, and the same predatory stillness she remembered from the alcove, except now it was aimed directly at her. The moment his eyes found her across the boardroom, he stopped walking. A slow, unmistakably possessive smile pulled at one corner of his mouth. "Mr. Marchetti," Gerald stammered, hand extended and shaking. "Thank you for trust in Sterling Hale. I'm Gerald Vance, senior partner, and this is my lead auditor, Nora Bellamy." Marchetti. The name settled into Nora's chest like a stone dropped down a well. Luca Marchetti, the reclusive billionaire who had taken the reins of Marchetti Holdings 5 years ago, and had given exactly 0 interviews since. A ghost who occasionally surfaced in the financial press and vanished again before anyone could get a straight answer out of him. Luca ignored Gerald's hand entirely. He crossed the room at an unhurried pace, gaze locked on Nora the entire way. "Miss Bellamy," he said, low enough that the timbre of it seemed to bypass the room and land straight in her chest. "What a coincidence. We only just missed each other last night." Gerald blinked between them. "You two know each other?" "Briefly acquainted," Luca said, stopping close enough that she caught the cedar and tobacco again, close enough to lower his voice so only she could hear it. "Though you left before I could properly return the favor." Nora squared her shoulders, refusing to give him the satisfaction of watching her rattle. "I apologize for the abrupt exit, Mr. Marchetti. I had an early morning ahead of me. Shall we begin with your quarterly ledgers?" Something flared in his dark eyes, amusement laced with something hungrier. He liked that she wasn't shrinking. "Of course. One condition." He turned his head toward Gerald without releasing Nora from his gaze. Miss Bellamy works directly with me from my private office. No intermediaries. Gerald nodded so fast it looked painful. Yes, absolutely, Mr. Marchetti. Whatever you need. For the next several days, Nora's professional life became a slow-burning psychological chess match. She was relocated to the 72nd floor, a glass fortress of a private office suite. And Luca became a fixture at its edges, a constant weight she felt whether or not he was in the room. He didn't touch her again. He didn't have to. His attention was its own kind of pressure. When she ordered a sad desk salad, it vanished within the hour, replaced by handmade tortellini from a private chef with a note that said, simply, "Eat something that actually feeds you." When she mentioned the office air conditioning ran cold, a courier arrived with a cashmere wrap cut to drape properly over her shoulders and her fuller bust, not some generic size that would have slid right off her. He was paying attention, cataloging her. It terrified her exactly as much as it thrilled her. And she hated how thin the line between those two feelings had become. There was one evening, midweek, when he'd come to stand behind her chair while she walked him through a variance in the shipping manifests, close enough that she lost the thread of her own sentence twice. She could feel the heat off him without either of them touching, could hear the low, even draw of his breath somewhere just behind her ear. When she finally turned to ask him a question, he was already looking down at her. And for one long, suspended second, neither of them said anything at all. His gaze dropped to her mouth. Hers, God help her, did the same to his. Then his phone buzzed against the desk. Some encrypted line he never let ring twice. And he stepped back like nothing had almost happened, leaving her hands unsteady over the keyboard for a full 5 minutes afterward. Neither of them mentioned it. Both of them remembered it. But Nora was good at her job. Frighteningly good, if she let herself admit it. On a rain-soaked Thursday evening, long after the rest of the 72nd floor had emptied out, she sat at the glass desk in Luca's outer office with 3 monitors glowing and a headache she'd earned honestly, tracing a series of shell entities buried under Marchetti logistics. The numbers refused to reconcile no matter how she turned them. Millions were routing through a concrete subsidiary out in Chelsea, disappearing offshore, then resurfacing weeks later as pristine, fully documented real estate acquisitions. It was money laundering, elegant and enormous, and it made her stomach drop, even as some traitorous part of her admired the architecture of it. She built the trail the way she'd been trained to, backward, from the clean end. A Cayman-registered holding company purchased a boutique hotel in the Back Bay with cash. The cash originated from a real estate trust in Delaware. The trust had received a wire from a shipping insurance settlement that, on paper, had never actually been filed with any insurer she could find. And underneath all of it, at the very bottom of the ledger, sat a concrete subsidiary in Chelsea, invoicing for pours that, according to the permit records she cross-checked twice out of sheer disbelief, had never actually happened. No trucks, no inspections, no crew hours logged. Just numbers, laundered clean through 3 jurisdictions and 4 shell entities until they came out the other side looking like nothing more than a very successful real estate portfolio. It was the best built structure she had ever taken apart, and knowing that made her feel a little sick. She printed the ledger and stood, meaning only to cross-reference it against the hard files in Luca's private office. The door left just slightly ajar down the hall. She pushed it open a few inches and froze. Luca stood at the window with his back to her, a phone she hadn't seen before pressed to his ear, and the polished, patient man from the boardroom was gone entirely. His voice had dropped into something low and guttural, a register she hadn't heard from him and hoped never to hear aimed at her. "I don't care what the councilman promised," he was saying. "Tell him he has 24 hours to sign off on the port expansion, or I bury him. I have the photographs from the hotel. I have the wire transfers. Tell him if he crosses this family again, I won't end his career. I'll erase his name from every registry in the city. He'll be less than a rumor. Do you understand me?" Nora stopped breathing. The pieces she'd been half-consciously assembling for days snapped together all at once, brutal and complete. This wasn't a logistics empire with a laundering problem. This was organized crime with a shipping license, and she had spent the last hour cataloging exactly how it worked. Her hand shook. The printed ledger slipped free and hit the hardwood with a soft, damning slap. Luca went silent mid-sentence. The quiet that followed was total, the kind of silence that has weight. Slowly, he ended the call, pocketed the phone, and turned. His eyes found her standing frozen in the doorway, found the pages scattered on the floor between them, and understood everything in a single glance. "Well," he said softly, that terrible stillness settling back over him as he started towards her. "It seems my auditor is working overtime." Nora couldn't make her legs move. The office was so quiet she could hear her own pulse pounding behind her ears. Luca crossed the space between them slowly, the walk of a man who had never once needed to rush toward anything, the storm outside throwing his silhouette into sharp relief against the glass. There was no anger in his face, and that was worse than anger would have been. Only a cold, deliberate calculation. And underneath it, something that looked almost like patience. He crouched, picked the ledger up off the floor, and smoothed the pages between his fingers before rising back to his full height, towering over her in a way that should have made her feel smaller, and instead made the air between them feel charged. "Thorough," he murmured. "Most auditors at your level would have glossed right past the shell company discrepancies to make the Friday deadline. Not you." "Let me leave," Nora said, and hated how much her voice shook. "I'll resign in the morning. I'll wipe every file. I saw nothing. I know nothing." A low sound rumbled out of his chest, something between a laugh and a warning. He reached out, his knuckles grazing the curve of her cheek. And she didn't pull away, even though every instinct told her to. She couldn't. "You're a terrible liar, Tesoro," he said quietly. "And we both know you can't leave. Not now. You can't keep me here." She lifted her chin, drawing on whatever nerve had gotten her across the guilt room 3 nights ago. "I'm a senior auditor at a respected firm. I have people who'd notice if I disappeared." "Sweet Nora." His gaze darkened, pity and something closer to affection tangled together. "Who do you think sent you to me?" She blinked. "What?" "Gerald Vance." He said the name the way a man sets down a weapon he's tired of carrying. "He has a gambling problem, your managing partner. He owes my associates just over $3 million. Most of it from a very bad run at a casino out in Connecticut. When I told him Sterling Hale needed to sign off on my books for a legitimate port acquisition, Gerald offered me you. The words hit like a physical blow. The air punched clean out of her. He knows who you are. He's known for months. Luca's voice stayed level, almost gentle, which made it crueler. He assumed you'd be a rubber stamp, someone hungry enough for partner to look away from anything inconvenient. And if you dug too deep instead, he assumed I'd handle it quietly, and he'd never have to think about it again. He threw you at me to save himself. Betrayal moved through her like acid, scorching everything it touched. Every late night and sacrificed weekend she'd spent building a career for a man who traded her like currency the moment it was convenient. Why are you telling me this? Because I don't want to eliminate you. His hand slid from her cheek to her waist, settling there with a weight that felt less like a threat and more like a claim being formally staked. When you crossed that room, at the guilt room in Sapphire, you weren't afraid of me. Men spend their whole lives flinching in my presence, and you sat in my lap and stole the breath out of my chest instead. He leaned closer, his mouth grazing the shell of her ear. You think your size is something to apologize for. It isn't. You are a masterpiece, Nora. A queen, not a woman meant to hide behind a desk. And right now, I need my queen's mind more than I've ever needed anything. Need me for what? She managed, though the fight had already started leaking out of her, replaced by something darker, hungrier. The FBI is building a RICO case, he said, business sliding back into his voice like a mask settling into place. Special Agent Cole Hargrove has been circling this family for 2 years. He knows about the Chelsea concrete plants. He doesn't have the paper trail yet. I need you to bury the money so deep in legitimate philanthropic structures that Hargrove goes blind looking for it. Fix my empire, Nora, and I will give you the world. And if I refuse, then Hargrove raids this building by Tuesday. I go to federal prison, and Gerald makes very sure you take the fall as the lead auditor who signed off on fraudulent accounts. His thumb traced slow over the fabric at her hip. We are chained together now to sorrow, whether either of us wanted it. Nora looked into his eyes and understood, with a clarity that frightened her more than anything he'd said, that the corporate world had never once protected her. Brooke mocked her for sport. Gerald had sold her to organized crime without losing a night's sleep over it. And here, in the one place she should have been most afraid, a monster in bespoke wool was the first person who'd ever offered her real power, instead of asking her to shrink for it. She reached up and rested her fingers against his lapel. I want Gerald Vance fired and stripped of his pension, she said, and her voice came out steady, almost cold. And I want complete autonomy over the trust structuring. You don't question my methods, not once. Something fierce and delighted broke across Luca's face. He wrapped his arm fully around her waist and pulled her flush against him. Deal. He didn't let go right away. His forehead came down to rest against hers, and for a moment, the empire, the RICO case, the councilman on the other end of a burner phone, all of it seemed to fall away from the room entirely. You should know, he said, quieter now, the hard business gone out of his voice. I've spent 5 years building walls around this family so thick, nobody gets close enough to see what's underneath. I told myself I didn't need anyone to. And then you walked across a room I owned like you didn't need my permission to exist in it. And every wall I'd built started looking like a very expensive waste of time. He exhaled, something almost like disbelief in it. I don't know what to do with wanting something I can't just acquire, Nora. I've never had to want anything I couldn't buy. You don't buy this, she said softly. You earn it, every day, starting with not lying to me again. Understood, he murmured, and meant it in a way that surprised even him. 3 weeks later, the grand hall of the Museum of Fine Arts was dressed in candlelight and old money, the annual gala for the Historical Society drawing every diamond and dinner jacket the city had to offer. Nora stood near the tall windows overlooking the Fenway, watching the lights scatter across the dark. She was no longer the cautious auditor who'd hidden behind charcoal suits and lowered eyes. Tonight she wore an emerald silk gown, a sweetheart neckline that made no apology for her bust. A bodice cinched tight before the fabric cascaded over her hips into a train that trailed behind her like something out of a coronation. She looked like royalty because, in every way that mattered now, she was. Across the room, Luca held court with a state senator and a judge who kept laughing a beat too long at everything he said. And every few seconds, his gaze would find her through the crowd, tracking her, guarding her without ever seeming to move. The last 3 weeks had been a blur of encrypted servers and midnight spreadsheets in the penthouse. And Nora had done exactly what she'd promised. She had dismantled the Marchetti family's dirty financial architecture piece by piece, funneling the Chelsea concrete money through a maze of clean, fully documented charitable trusts until the whole structure gleamed. She had, quite simply, outsmarted the federal government. Luca excused himself from the senator mid-sentence, unable to help himself, and let his eyes trace the line of her from across the room, the way he'd been doing all night. The emerald silk, the set of her shoulders, the way she held a room now without ever raising her voice in it. 3 weeks ago, she had been a frightened woman with a printed ledger shaking in her hand. Tonight, she looked like she'd been born to stand under a chandelier and dismantle empires before dessert was served. He had built Marchetti Holdings out of nothing but nerve and inherited enemies, had never once needed anyone standing beside him to do it. He wanted her there anyway. That fact alone told him everything he needed to know about how far gone he was. Miss Bellamy, or should I say the new chief financial officer of Marchetti Holdings. She turned, champagne flute in hand, to find a tall man with silvering hair and eyes the color of chipped ice. He flashed a badge from inside his jacket. Special Agent Cole Hargrove, FBI. His smile was smug, practiced. You look stunning tonight. Quite the upgrade from an auditor's salary, wouldn't you say? Nora didn't flinch. She took a slow sip of champagne. Good evening, Agent Hargrove. I don't discuss compensation at charity events. He stepped closer, dropping his voice into something meant to intimidate. You think you're clever. A number cruncher who decided to play mobster. We know about the kiss at the Gilt Room, Nora. We know Marchetti used you to scrub the Chelsea books. You've hidden the paper trail well, but I will tear your life apart to find it. I'll subpoena your family. I'll freeze every account you've ever touched, turn state's evidence now, and I can still protect you from him. Nora laughed, a real laugh, low and genuinely amused. and it visibly rattled him. "Protect me." She tilted her head, looking at him with something close to pity. "Agent Hargrove, you have nothing. I've restructured Marchetti Holdings into a fortress. Every dollar is accounted for in audited, sovereign-backed philanthropic trusts. Subpoena me and my legal team, the most expensive in the state. We'll sue the Bureau for targeted harassment before your case ever sees a judge's desk. You'll lose your pension and your badge before you lose your temper." Hargrove's face went a mottled red, his composure cracking into something desperate. "You arrogant. Is there a problem here, Agent?" The room went cold the way it had gone cold at the Guilt Room 3 weeks earlier. That same drop in temperature she'd felt the first time he walked toward her. Luca stepped up behind her, his presence swallowing the space around them whole, his voice quiet enough that only the three of them heard the promise buried inside it. His hand found the curve of her waist, fingers pressing into emerald silk, unmistakably his. Hargrove's jaw ticked. "Enjoy the party, Marchetti. The feds never sleep." "Neither do we," Luca said, cold and pleasant all at once. "Now get away from my woman before I have you escorted into the harbor." Hargrove sneered but backed off, melting into the crowd. Luca turned her gently by the waist, his dark eyes moving over her face like he was memorizing it for the first time. "Did he upset you, Tesoro?" "Not even slightly." She smiled, resting her palms against the solid warmth of his chest. "I just reminded him he's playing checkers and we own the board." He let out a low, rough breath and pressed his forehead to hers. "You are magnificent. You saved my empire. You saved me." "I did my job, Mr. Marchetti," she teased. "No." He pulled back just enough to look at her fully, his gaze burning with something absolute. "You took your throne. Right here, under the ceiling, in front of every person in this city who ever underestimated you." He kissed her then, the same commanding, consuming kiss from that first night at the Guilt Room, except this time Nora didn't run. She wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him back with every ounce of the power she had finally stopped apologizing for. She had been dared to kiss a monster. In the end, she had become his queen. Did Nora's fierce, unshakable courage and Luca's dark, protective heat keep you on the edge of your seat? If you loved this intense Mafia romance, hit that like button right now. Share it with someone who lives for a slow burn with real teeth. And subscribe so you never miss another steamy, high-stakes story. Leave a comment telling us what you think happens the morning after that gala. See you in the next one.